We are back with another episode of the MLS Aces Podcast. This is your host, Tom Sweezy, and sticking with the New Year's resolution, 2 episodes a week. We're trying to get our interviews in earlier in the week after the USL decided to drop a bomb on the U.S. soccer fandom. There's no one better to bring in than John Morrissey, or better known as USL Tactics. John, thanks for coming back on the pod to talk a little USL Division 1 news.
No, I'm super excited to be here. Obviously a gigantic story, so a lot to dig into.
So I think first and foremost, right, for those of you who don't know, if you're not following along, if you haven't seen the news, I think obviously it's all over soccer social media, but USL made the announcement last week, and specifically, I think the pieces of information that came out in the Paul Tenorio Athletic article, where he had an exclusive interview with USL President Paul McDonough, but pretty much USL is planning on dropping a first division soccer league by 2027, 2028, in hopes to bring, I think, even more first division, high-level soccer to more communities across America. The plan for this is going to be a 12 to 14, I think initially a 12 to 14 club league. Obviously, there's a lot to dive into this, but, USL always has the conversations of promotion and relegation all within it. So, John, my first question for you is, do we have a proper soccer wars back in U.S. soccer?
I mean, it really is kind of the interesting question here of, is the USL kind of just looking out for itself, trying to grow organically? Is this the next step? Or is this something that's signifying, hey, we really want to go toe-to-toe with MLS? To me, if they really want to do a soccer war, that feels like a gigantic mistake and something that is probably going to mean the demise of the USL ultimately.
Yeah.
I think some people have kind of posited maybe they're pushing for a merger, which maybe feels like the happy medium. But no matter how you slice it, a massive call from the league office down in Tampa.
I like to think of things not so black and white, or I'm trying to train my brain not to think of things so black and white, right? I don't think you have to be a fan of just MLS or just USL. The same way, right? I like the team in my market. USL did not have a New York team for a while that wasn't attached to the Red Bulls too and all of that. So I became a New York City fan, right? So that was my local team. I think USL has such a special place in the U.S. soccer pyramid structure, whatever you want to call it. And I don't know if I'm the biggest fan of this move, because I think, right, whether you're talking about the geography, whether you're talking about just how U.S. soccer is built up, how it's governed and everything like that, you're not going to get a traditional soccer pyramid in this country. I don't think any which way you can cut it, shape it, and I'm sure people out there are probably disagreeing with me, and you might disagree with me, but this almost feels like USL had such a great stranglehold of lower division soccer. And to your point, I don't know if this is going to be a successful battle, if that's what they want it to be. If they want it to be some kind of merger, which I could see, then great, but I also have my doubts about that. I don't know, where are you leaning more in your brain of what this could potentially actually be versus what maybe just the headlines are being thrown out there?
I think in the best case scenario, you take maybe ultimately 16 to 20 USL clubs, and the ones that have a stadium, the ones that are located in big cities, think about Lou City, Phoenix, maybe Indy down the road. If you can get kind of that top upper crust and set them apart, let them take advantage of the fact that there's going to be a nationwide spread, let them kind of find the market with investors who are more interested in a first division label, whether that's broadcasting partners like CBS, who might be more interested because of that. If you can take advantage of that and kind of just scale up for the clubs that feel ready to do so, that's a very safe step. That's something that kind of goes in line with what we've seen from the USL over the years, which is gradual growth, decision-making that, while bold at times, has never been terribly risky. Mm-hmm. If that's the vision here, I'm all for it. There are possibilities of MLS competition. I think the pro-rel thing is a real wrench in the plans, frankly. There's just a lot of question marks. And I know we're less than a week out from getting this news in the first place. There will be a ton of answers down the road. But for now, it's just a lot to worry about if you're someone like me who's really invested in this league.
I think I like to start things at maybe the most base level possible. You put out a great article, and I want you to obviously, highlight some of the key points in that. But you give the listeners, and obviously myself as well, what does USSF define as a first division league, and what does some of these markets that you made, right? The Indies, the Phoenixes, the Lou Cities, maybe even the Las Vegases of the world, right? What do they need to do or to have in order to, I guess, meet the qualifications of a Division I league and club?
Yeah, so I mean, there are 4 or 5, depending on how you want to count it, kind of big requirements that the federation dictates for a first division league. Part of it is like owner net worth, not going to be a problem for the USL. It's a pretty low bar. The amount of clubs has to be 12 at launch and then 14 by the third year of operation. Like, the USL is drawing from more than 30 pro teams already, not going to be an issue. There's the active operation in 3 or more time zones. Again, we're just checking boxes here. Like, that's going to be an easy.
These are the easy ones. These are the easy ones.
You get a little bit of a question with 75% of the clubs that you've got in your league need to be in a metro area with a population of 1 million or above. That wouldn't be a problem on the face of things. Like, there are more than, I think, almost 60 markets in America that meet that hurdle. But like, you look at a team like Colorado Springs, they've got their own stadium. It's a lovely facility.
Yeah.
They play in a metro that's smaller than that. New Mexico United, who is building their own facility, one of the best attended clubs in the USL, they're below that barrier. So that starts to give you a little bit of a challenge of, okay, how do we put this together in a way where we're still highlighting the teams that deserve to be highlighted, that have done a great job, but also ones that like meet this minimum?
Yeah.
And now kind of the real deal breaker amongst it all is that every club in theory has to have a stadium with 15,000 seats or more. There is not a single team in the USL that owns their own stadium and plays in a stadium big enough to meet that minimum. Like, Miami is in a college football arena, Birmingham's in a college football arena. They don't own those. They don't control those dates. That's not what the USL has been pushing towards in terms of their trajectory. So unless US Soccer decides en masse they are just going to kind of waive that requirement, there's not really a viable path forward for the USL. Now, way back when in the 2010s, when the league was moving up from Division III up to Division II, they kind of had the same issue. Many clubs were not compliant, and US Soccer said, okay, we get it. We're going to grant you these waivers. Now, it's a different situation when the NASL is collapsing and US Soccer really wants a league up there at the D2 level versus the USL kind of saying, we're creating a splinter to go next to MLS. So that's, for now, the big question mark. Like, Paul McDonough, in that interview you mentioned with Paul Tenorio, made noise about the fact that they are in active communication with the federation.
Yeah.
You got to figure the waiver thing is on the docket every time they're talking. But for now, that feels like the thing that's kind of the death knell, right? In a regulatory sense.
And again, I like to think I know a good amount about USL. I don't think I know as much as there's plenty of USL fans out there that are dedicated, and I love it. And I do not know as much as them, and I do not know as much about USL as you do. And of the teams that we can either safely assume that were mentioned in that Paul Tenorio article, I know you mentioned a few as well in yours that you can maybe easily see make the case for, make the jump, like a Tampa Bay even, right? How many of those roughly own their own stadium? And then if they do, would probably be trying to get to work as soon as possible and maybe adding a few more seats to the stands here?
Yeah, I mean, if you're kind of looking at it in tiers, like Louisville City, they're about 12K seats, but they're 15,000 standing room only. You can figure out a way to get there.
Yeah.
Phoenix Rising, that's a club who plays in a modular stadium, very much customizable. You could easily just knock that out in a summer of getting above the minimum. Sacramento, well on their way to building a new facility. They kind of got new investment over the winter that'll knock that out by 2027 or 2028. Pretty much the same thing for Detroit and Oakland as well, where they've got projects in place. So already that's a decent core. Now you're looking at New Mexico, where they've had a little bit of trouble with the kind of on the ground, not in my backyard thing, stadium wise. The population matters there, but they feel like a lock. When I published my first article, I kind of got some feedback from some folks in Pittsburgh saying, don't count out the Riverhounds. Right now, their stadium is only a 5,000 seater, but it's expandable. They've got plans to expand it. From what I hear, they're very interested in D1, so that feels safe. San Antonio, another one where they've got an expandable facility. The wrinkle with them is that the city of San Antonio owns that stadium and the club kind of leases it, which makes it harder to expand. Like you've got less of that control. Colorado Springs, Rhode Island, and Tampa all own their facility. Going to be under the number they need to be at, but like again, you see the pathway there. Like a little bit of investment, a couple of summers of construction. There you go. I think Indy 11, kind of rumors swirling that they're going to try to build in a northern suburb of the city. Like given that they had the plan in place, but then an MLS bid came in. They wanted to be downtown. They won't ultimately. I would keep an eye on OKC and Dallas, 2 expansion markets, or in OKC's case, kind of a returning market.
I was going to say OKC. That's one from a while ago now.
Yeah, OKC got some like private equity investment, and then Russell Westbrook is also part of the ownership group there now. So both of those feel like they've got some dedicated and moneyed owners. I don't know how many teams I listed, but that's a lot. Like that's well above what you need, 12 to 14. So can it be done by 2027, 2028? No, like that's a lot of construction that needs to get done. But say you're launching that year, you've got waivers for 3 years. That's at least within the realm of possibility to get over the line.
The thing that, one, I agree with you. I think if U.S. Soccer grants some waivers the same way they did, like you mentioned a few years ago, from D3 to D2, this seems very possible. This seems like it could, even if you're just getting the 12 teams for the first year and then you're going to slowly ramp it up from there, this seems more than possible that USL will have a fully functioning first division outside after the 2026 World Cup. But the 2026 World Cup is the thing that I think adds even more of a wrinkle to this. And I mentioned this in a few things that I've written or I've spoken about. To me, every single U.S. soccer league, club, whatever you're talking about, entity, should be trying to do something, I think, special, important, something a little bit maybe historic, record-breaking, whatever word you want to throw in there, in preparation for the 2026 World Cup, because you are going to have the most eyes, the most finances, the most everything until, we host it again, whenever that might be, decades down the line or whatever, on the eyes, on the sport, on your club, on your organization, whatever. Do you think that the USL maybe is feeling some kind of pressure that they need to do something here, and that, maybe, and again, I hate comparing, I hate doing like tit for tat, but maybe MLS did the Lionel Messi splash and Inter Miami and all this stuff and the Club World Cup and blah, blah, blah. Do you think this is USL's attempt that, okay, we can have a 3-tiered system of US soccer, 1 through 3, promotion, relegation, and be a much more attractive, much more globally recognizable system in US soccer?
I think that's definitely an influence. Like you talk to anybody at any club and they are well aware that the sport is going to balloon in popularity after we host the World Cup, or at least the majority of the World Cup. I think we've seen some of the smaller steps. Like you think about the Jägermeister Cup expansion, kind of getting that interleague play, adding the fun of a tournament within that normal league structure. That was kind of the first plank to almost test the waters of, okay, what if we've got the Chattanooga Red Wolves playing against the Sacramento Republic? Like, what does that look like in practice? And so I think that's going to be useful for the league. They're hoping to kind of grow the presence, maybe get a new TV partner in the mix for that. And then, of course, the first division feels like the thing where coming off that World Cup year, we can say, this is a league that people should care about, that's competing at the highest possible level in American soccer. I think if you pair that kind of big stroke that the league is doing with committed marketing in market, like making sure that the local community that started to care about the sport during the World Cup is locked in the run up to it, it kind of has to be that double pronged approach, because just saying, well, US soccer says we're Division 1 now, that doesn't necessarily mean anything to a casual fan who was really drawn in by international teams playing. But if you're making the sales pitch of, you watch the World Cup, we're bringing you something comparable and it's brand new and it's exciting and it involves pro rel down the line, I think that carries a lot more water for people who might want to dip their toe into the USL.
don't necessarily think this isn't a play for USL to maybe, and I've seen this online. This is not my own original take. I very much agree with the take, though. I like to be very clear that this is USL almost inflating their product as much as possible, making it its highest price point ever for MLS to almost feel pressured of 2026 World Cup. We really want to stranglehold the soccer market in America. We need to merge. We need to buy out USL, however that business transaction goes down, that's above my pay grade. But I'm not sold that isn't the play. But if it's not the play, and this is really Paul McDonough, this is the leadership at USL really feeling like they can put out a product that is going to be comparable, if not better, than MLS and make their own mark. I think even internationally as well with its clubs. I'm excited to see it, and I love the energy and I love the passion. Do I have my doubts and my concerns? Yes, but I also think this could be very interesting when you talk about Sacramento, Phoenix, Indy, Mexico, whoever, in terms of what does now the U.S. Open Cup mean? What does now USL's spot in a CONCACAF Champions Cup look like? Because these are all realistic things that, personally, I think USL, if we're talking about just soccer leagues in CONCACAF, right? USL, probably a top 5-6 soccer league in CONCACAF, and I'm probably underselling it there 100%. I think that, yes, it's not traditional second division soccer league. I get the whole thing, but the amount of money players developed, players sold, all of that, I think USL should already have a spot in CONCACAF Champions League, even if it's one and whatever. But I think this could make things even much more interesting for USL clubs in terms of continental play, in terms of international play, and again, getting their brands, their teams out there even more. I don't know. I rambled a lot there, but are there any thoughts around what this could mean for the league outside of promotion, relegation, and Division I status that may not mean something?
Yeah, I mean, I tend to be a little bit skeptical of the merger idea just because so many of these owners have been around for a decade, losing millions of dollars a year just to say, we're going to get bought out once. You don't even know if you're recouping the investment. And for a lot of these guys, it genuinely isn't about the money. They just love the prestige of owning a sports team. They love being involved in this. And so I think D1, you can really spin it as this is another step on the road to sustainability and profitability. It's a kick in the bud for the teams that don't control their venue to start doing that, to operate their space and take full control of ticket sales, merchandising sales. You've got your dates, so you're getting on Saturday no matter what, rather than kind of playing in these odd weekdays. That all matters towards the bottom line.
Yeah.
I think another thing that people kind of sleep on is the fact that being a selling league can be very profitable. If the USL can kind of continue to grow, move up the food chain within the global transfer market, that's only going to make that selling aspect, the kind of payoff to what teams are building academy-wise, that much more handsome at the end of the day. Moreover, if you're an advertiser, if you're a broadcast network, and you don't know much about the sport of soccer, but you see first division rather than second division, that probably matters to the paycheck you're willing to offer. Yeah. It's a lot of marginal gains that the USL could end up benefiting from, that for, say, a team like Detroit City that's losing $1 million, $2 million a year, suddenly enough of those pile up and you're in the green. D1 is kind of a fast track towards the ultimate end of making this league make sense for all of these stakeholders on the financial side.
I feel like we've also talked around this topic a little bit. Do you think two first division professional leagues can operate and sustain at the same exact time in U.S. soccer?
My answer would be yes, because implicitly, everyone would know that MLS is the more competitive league, the league with the higher salaries, the league that's more attractive for foreign players. The open secret of it would be MLS is the top dog, and the USL, in terms of play quality, probably wouldn't end up matching up. And that's only natural. MLS has a 30-year head start in terms of relevance. Yeah. They have richer stakeholders. They've got teams in bigger cities. So I think overall, how much does it matter in terms of the differentiation? That's a hard question to know. And I think a lot of it depends on how the USL sells itself. But yeah, it's kind of a thorny one.
It's right. It's almost a trick question to an extent, right? Because I think to a lot of people you also just mentioned, right? Marketers to TV broadcasters, that status of Division 1 versus Division 2 means a lot. But in terms of maybe the fan, it necessarily, I mean, to some people it might mean a lot, and I get why, but I think it might not necessarily mean a lot to everyone. If you're a supporter of, I'm trying to think of the most obscure USL team I can think of right now, Union Omaha, right? I mean, they're a very good USL League One team, but whatever. If you're a fan of Union Omaha, you may not care if your team's in USL League One, the Championship, Division One, MLS, wherever. You are going to be a diehard supporter of your club, and I think to an extent that's almost what this potentially leads to. If I'm trying to think of this in the most optimistic way possible, right? You have MLS and USL, whatever we're going to call it, USL first division, that are operating at the same level structurally, but there is that, like you mentioned, underlying. We understand maybe MLS is the spending the more money. They're developing more, not developing more talent, because I don't even know if that's necessarily true, but you get it. They're doing maybe a little bit more on the global scale in terms of players wanting to come to the US to play soccer. Maybe they want to go to MLS over USL because, oh, that's the league David Beckham played in. That's the league, Lionel Messi played it, or whatever. But that doesn't necessarily mean USL isn't going to have its place. I just always think of the inner workings of what is that going to mean for Open Cup? What is that going to mean for Champions Cup? But that's probably something 12 steps down the line that I'm thinking ahead to there. Is there anything that stands out to you from the stuff that you're hearing, from what you read in that Paul Tenorio article, from what you're putting out for yourself, that you feel like if you were a soccer fan in this country, or not in this country, and you just wanted to get a little bit more of what's kind of coming down the line over the next few weeks and months, what stands out to you, I guess, in that sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think the way that they position the start date as this kind of 2027, 2028, there's been a lot of rumbling over the years that maybe the USL kind of looks towards the winter calendar, the European-based calendar, really, if we're thinking about the timing. When you're denoting it as, okay, it's cutting across 2 years, that feels like there's smoke to the fire of they're seriously considering that change.
Yeah.
And we saw with the launch of the USL Super League, the First Division Women's League that they did, which, by the way, is cohabiting with the NWSL at the top of the pyramid. And I think we've already seen like what that relationship looks like, of like players who are on the end of the bench in the NWSL are getting loaned to the Super League. Like, that's a preview of things to come, probably. Yeah. But more on the calendar point, like, if the USL goes that model, that feels like something where they're almost trying to get out of MLS's way to a certain extent, like trying to separate the calendar and say, okay, you've got the summer, we've got the winter. There's going to be some overlap, but somebody can be a fan of both things. I think the alignment with the European transfer window, given the USL's long stated goals of like selling young players over, also matters quite a bit. Yeah. So that was something that stood out in the press release for me, for sure.
I just to stay on that really quick. When I saw that, my brain went to it. I was like, "Oh, that's an interesting way to word a league in U.S. soccer," because right, like it's the 2027 MLS or USL season or USL Championship season or whatever, right? Like it's always that calendar year. When I saw that, I was like, "Okay, it means this is the European calendar," and I think that makes this puts USL even more of an interesting player in the game with that, or they don't know when it's going to be official by, so they're just throwing out 2 calendar years of this is a rough estimate. But I think this could be huge, right? My co-host of my podcast, Jason Vivang, big MLS guy, he's in the Chicago market, right? So he knows the Chicago Fire, loves the Chicago Fire, but he's been to a few Forward Madison games, and he's always like just been intrigued by that team. Like obviously they came in with the bang, and the jerseys are fun, and the off the field's fun. But I think they got him a little peaked into USL, and then he even said to me, which is not something I expected from him, that USL is a better product when you look at it, not like on the field, but the overall packaging of USL, and that they have something that could maybe outlast MLS come 20, 30 years. I don't know if financially that's true. Maybe it is. Maybe it's not. I'm not a finance person, so please, people listening, watching, don't come at me for that. But I think it's a true thing that it's traditional. It's going to make people connect to it. If people know, okay, this is what the Premier League and La Liga does, this is what USL is doing. It's a European market. It's promotion relegation. And that's the point that I want to touch on with you really quickly, because Paul McDonough commented on it. Paul Tenorio asked about it. There's been rumblings of it. We've had previous leadership of USL mention it. We've had current leadership of USL mention it now. Do you think that promotion relegation is something that, I don't want to say is it realistic, because obviously there's comments made, but I don't know. It's something that I need to see actually happen in US soccer before I can believe it, I guess. I don't know. What are your thoughts on the comments made around Pro Rel?
I mean, we had a long discussion about the Pro League standards.
Yeah.
That's going to be a tenuous balance no matter what. Now imagine year one, you finally got the proper stadiums, and then, I don't know, let's say Hartford and Monterey, who play in 6,000 seaters, get promoted. What happens then?
Yeah,
what happens to the time zone requirements? What happens to the million? Like, there are a whole lot of questions that come along with Pro Rel. I tend to be more skeptical than some people online of kind of the all-encompassing effect that Pro Rel might have. I'm sure there is a segment of the fandom out there that would be really drawn in by it. At the end of the day, like, do I think that people are going to be dying to watch Loudoun and Union Omaha play in a relegation battle to see who goes down to League One? I don't. I don't think that is something that draws in the casual fan.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong about that. I'm wrong quite often, but it's certainly something that, at least if we're thinking about getting people in the door, getting someone to say, oh, this is like Europe. This has promotion and relegation. Mm-hmm. I'm going to come to a USL game and just see what it's all about. Then you're drawn in by the sense of community, that really kind of grassroots experience you can get at a lot of these stadiums. That's going to win you over long term in a way that maybe Pro Rel isn't the consistent thing. But if it's a draw for enough people to just say, okay, the USL exists and I'm going to take a look, I think it's a net positive. But boy, are the logistics very hard.
Oh, the logistics are insane. I feel like you would have to have an Eastern Conference, a Central Conference, right, a Pacific, a Western Conference, whatever, and then 3 people get relegated, and then there's a lot to it. I'm not trying to break down what it would actually look like. But the thing that I want to finish off this conversation with, John, and again, I appreciate your time and kind of breaking this down a little bit more for myself and for people listening and watching, is you mentioned it, right? I think the thing that has USL successful right now in the first place, but also the thing that's going to lead USL to continue to be successful, is the grassroots side of things. I think it's a sense of community. This is the club in your market, or maybe this is the club that there might be other clubs in your market, let's say Miami FC or whatnot, but this is the club that maybe you connect with a little bit more in your market, that has your heart a little bit more, whatever it may be. I think if, no matter what the outcome is, whether there's a merger, whether it's Pro Rel and USL's competing, and whatever comes, my personal opinion is, I think whoever is the governing body of this all, USL, MLS, whatever, NASL, if they want to make a comeback, they really just need to focus on how can we develop the soccer community in this market, in this city, in this state, and how can we develop the US soccer player underneath that. I think that's such an important point that you hit on, and I don't know if you have anything else you want to kind of touch on in terms of the grassroots level of it all, but it's something we've seen happening more and more across multiple leagues in US soccer. But I think it's such a key point of what makes USL also so special.
I think from our perspective, people who cover this sport, who really kind of live and breathe it day in and day out, it's easy to think of the person who's at the stadium watching the game as a diehard fan. The majority of people there are families just looking for some entertainment, casual people who just want to be there. they aren't activated by these kind of in-depth discussions. They're activated by the marketing in the community, the way that a club engages with the youth. So focus on that and you're going to be better off. Like all of those things are ultimately what is going to make the USL successful. And I will say, like, you look at the D1 announcement, they use the word community 9 different times in the official league press release. That's a hint of they still have their priorities straight, even if this seems like something that's a bold move. So that makes me bullish that they still understand the core of what makes the USL special and what can make it successful going forward.
It's the last piece, and I say last a lot whenever I have conversations with people, is it's something you and I have touched on. It's something I've seen other people touch on. It's something, I don't know, to the extent of Charlie Davies talking about it on CBS when it came out to the announcement, that there are more than just, and I am an MLS podcast, I'm a fan of an MLS team, all of that. There are more than just 30 soccer markets in America. There is a place for USL, whether it's at the D1, D2, D3, and if we want to break it all the way down, all these levels, right? Yeah. And I think that is the thing that I want people to take away from any perspective or conversation about it, is there's a million markets in this country that probably deserve some level of U.S. soccer love, and you can only hope that it's just it expands a little bit more. Maybe we see a more broken down pyramid, all of that fun stuff, but just focus on the community, focus on your local soccer team at whatever level, support it, love it, go to a game, talk about it on a podcast, whatever, and celebrate U.S. soccer your way. John, tell the people where they can find your work, listen to you, read you, watch you, whatever you want to go for.
I mean, anything I'm doing, I'll be posting on Twitter or Blue Sky at USL Tactics. Make sure you're subscribed to the USL show wherever you get your podcasts. And then backheeled.com is kind of the crux of my writing. Like, I've got a Substack for whatever, but later this month, I've got a enormous USL season preview coming that's like 30,000 words, and I've still got a lot to go. So if you're a sicko, hey, that's for you.
I love it. Can we get a little hint at maybe just sprinkle in a team or two that you really like? You don't need to go with, like, you know, they're going to win it all, but what's a team or two people should maybe try to do a little bit more Googling on right now?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like Rhode Island, despite the fact that they made the championship game in their expansion season, they're still new. People kind of don't know what they're about. They're opening a brand new stadium, kind of right near Providence. They've got an incredibly fun team to watch. If you don't know Connor Smith, the manager there, he's going to be in MLS sooner rather than later.
Feels like a guy like that, yeah.
Yeah, he and I've interviewed him a couple times, and he's fantastic. It couldn't be nicer. So be sure to just like check out a Rhode Island game. Fun soccer there as well. If you're looking for a team that's just weird, love Miami FC.
Love it.
They'll have about 7 people at the games. Their whole shtick now is that they got some new investment out of Argentina, including Manu Ginobili, for any NBA fans out there. They've signed 6 Argentine players already, including Sebastian Blanco, who's like 36 and can hardly walk, but might be their best player. They might be a train wreck. They might be fun, but it's going to be entertaining no matter what.
Also Bill Hamid in that. I did see
That's
that.
right. Yeah.
Love it. All right, John. Thank you so much, man. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you.